Hello, everybody. Dr. Melanie Battles here with Scholars for the Soul, and we are talking about navigating the spectrum of resistance types. So, this is for educational, specifically school leaders who are working on rolling out those new initiatives, but you're getting the side eyes, you're getting the huffing and puffing during the faculty meeting, you're getting half hearted implementation, or some people are flat out refusing to actually engage in the work. And so, what we're going to talk about today is that in order to actually see the work that you have planned so beautifully in your staff meetings and strategic planning meetings, and you put all this stuff in your what they call it, school improvement plans, or whatever your district calls these documents. It's real cute there, right? It's real cute there, but it's got to move from the paper to practice. You can't get it to move from paper to practice if you're not able to, first of all, identify the pockets of resistance. So, hey, y'all, if you have saw the last week's episode, you know what I'm talking about. But if you missed it, the replay is available wherever you're watching this. So I've got my computer and I've got my phone here. The replay is there. Go back and watch last week, because you've got to be able to, first of all, recognize how to identify those pockets of resistance. Then once you're able to say, okay, I see resistance here, I see it there, I know where to find it, how to actually be able to quickly identify it. Excuse me, y'all. Identify that pocket of resistance. Now you've got to be able to now tell, what type of resistance am I dealing with? Because if you've been in education, and quite honestly, this can go for any workspace, any community space. It happens in our classrooms. I don't know any teacher, any leader that has always had 100% buy-in. If you have, put them in the comments below, because I got to give them kudos. But the reality is, no matter how excited you are about this new initiative that you want to roll out, no matter how much you have planned for it, if you are not aware and insightful that resistance is inevitable, you will fail and miss the mark every time, and not fail forward in the way of growth. It gets to the point where some of us, especially those of us in leadership, we get so frustrated, and then we sometimes isolate ourselves. Then I've even seen, and all I'm talking about is from experience, okay? I've even seen where people try to bully teachers into compliance. Hold on, guys. Let me make sure I've got this do not disturb on. Okay. I had to make sure my do not disturb was on so I didn't have any problems. But sometimes I've seen leaders try to literally bully teachers into doing this new initiative, into actually implementing the work. And what I have to say, specifically as it relates to equity, because that's a huge buzzword that's been floating around since for at least I know, and been seeing it float around more with COVID, right? You've had not just schools, we've seen it everywhere. Everybody's got an equity statement, everybody's hired a DEI specialist. Like, the world went crazy with the COVID virus, and that pandemic, and then the illustration or the evidence of what's been happening for so long with the racial pandemic, right? So you've got all these beautiful statements on websites, you've got these beautiful plans, but then some folks are trying to bully teachers into doing the work. And let me tell you, I have witnessed that happen, and I have witnessed very many. You may have a few teachers that will comply because they want to be a good worker. They want to do the right thing, or they want to just go with the flow. They don't want any trouble. But I've seen plenty of teachers dig their heels down and say, I'm absolutely not going to do it. And right now, because we have such a shortage on teachers, what are you going to do? You going to fire everybody that doesn't want to do what you want them to do? Are you going to get behind those emails and send out emails where you are, one thing I abhor or detest, I'm trying to use other words other than hate so you can really understand. It bothers me to get those mass emails where we know it was meant. Oh, okay. Hold on, guys. Hold on, you guys, on LinkedIn and YouTube. Can y'all hear me now? Can y'all hear me now? Can y'all hear me now? Still no? It's so funky when it does that with can't hear. I don't know why I just missed with the camera. Give me 1 second, you all. Technical difficulties. I'm gonna have to go out and come back. So come back. Okay. Did y'all know that the new Give me 1 second, my beautiful people who are watching. You know, tech does what tech does. So I'm gonna try this again. Y'all know that the new Okay, let me go to live. All right, let's try one more time. Thank you for holding on for those watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. All right, so we're back. Okay, technical difficulties happen on Instagram. Hopefully the folks come back. But one thing that happens, and we're talking about navigating resistance and actually identifying the spectrum of resistance, right? And one thing that really burns my britches, as old school would say, is that when you have leadership, and I've seen it before, and I've done my best to not do this, but I've seen it happen from a space of desperation, right? You're trying, the district could even be telling you this needs to be implemented. We need to be able to see some data, and your staff is absolutely refusing, and they're not children. So you can't, and even with children, you can't force them to do the work, right? But what I absolutely am irritated about is when I see leadership out of all the desperation and the intention to get the work done, but it's just a bad move. They send out emails to the entire staff or the entire department where you are penalizing, or not even penalizing, kind of like you're fussing at one particular person on your staff team, one particular person or one group of people that are heavy in the resistance, and you blasted that out to the entire staff. So what does that do? Now you create this system where you are permitting this toxicity of resistance to continue to flow, right? And so what you have to be able to do as a leader is actually be equipped. And so when I see leadership acting in ways of desperation rather than Brooke, I know you have, rather than being that person that is going to work on connecting with the staff, right? Because being singled out, I've got Brooke on Instagram, and she's being singled out because she wants to do the equity work, but they don't really want to do it, right? So that's a whole different caveat from the singling out I'm speaking of. But the point is, it doesn't create space for connection. It doesn't create space for motivation and buy-in. Remember last week we talked about adult learning theory? Again, if you missed last week's live, go back and watch it. I'm going to recap it, but it doesn't tie in with what we really want to see if we're doing our leadership work according to the principles of adult learning theory. And so often we're just throwing a target out, right? We're trying to get this equity initiative off the ground. We know that it will work because we know that it will take full head, body, mind, soul, all the things have to be ingrained, have to be integrated in order for it to work. But some people will just not be on board. So if you go around bullying staff to get them to be compliant for your equity work, oh no, that's not how equity work works, right? Because equity work is work that has to center the soul, meaning that your soul has to have buy-in. It has to be connected. It may not understand all the things. It may not know all the research. It may not be one of the top scholars in equity work. We're not saying that, but there has to be a level and space of readiness and willingness. If the readiness and willingness are not there, then you're going to get into the space of compliance. And one thing I've talked about on lives before is schooling versus educating. So when you're talking about schooling, you're talking about the 3 C's: conformity, compliance, and control. If you are saying that this is not what we want for our students, but then we flip the coin and we do the same thing with the adults who are nurturing, who are teaching, who are engaging our young people, it's not connecting and it's not making sense. And now you've got gaps and you've got holes in your leadership style because you're trying to bully and force feed equity on people that have to first do the soul work. If you've been with me at any point in these last few years that I've been on Instagram, you know that Scholars for the Soul is all about soul work and soul care. It took time for me to even get here, and I'm not even, I will never claim to be at the pinnacle of my growth spectrum, right? I'm always open because being a soul scholar, my coin term, being a soul scholar, one of the first parts of that definition is being a lifelong learner. That means I've got to be a learner first of myself, right? And so when you're talking about equity work, you've got to know, first of all, that if it took you some time to get to this space of readiness, willingness, excitement, ambition. I mean, I've gone to conferences. It's funny, I've got a couple people on here that know about these conferences. Like, for example, me and Crystal, the renewed teacher, hey sis, we went to the State of Black Learning, right? I think King Chase is on here as well. Went to the State of Black Learning Conference. Absolutely mesmerized, absolutely pumped up, absolutely ready with ideas, right? Even though I presented at that conference, I was also fed. But everybody's not going to these conferences, y'all. Everybody's not on lives like mine and Teach for the Culture and other folks like Hip Hop and SEL and all these other people that are doing this work. Everybody's not there yet. So when you understand that, what you have to understand is that in order for me to move from schooling, control, conformity, and compliance, and move to educating, right? Where we're talking about liberation and we're talking about allowing student genius to flow in a multiple or variety of ways. When we're talking about not confining one's intelligence to a space, right? But allowing for curiosity and connection to be the fertile ground through which you plant your seeds, right? You plant your seeds of love. You plant your seeds of information. You plant your seeds of gathering data and testing things out and all the things we do or should be doing in schools. In order for that space to be there, we've got to know, what is this adult learning theory? So I'm not going to give y'all a full out lesson because I've done it the last couple lives. So I'm just going to name the principles. And these principles have actually been research based, right? And it shows how you can increase motivation and buy-in, which is what you really need as a leader. The reason why you're so frustrated half the time, if it's not 60, 70, 80% of the time, the reason why we're frustrated as instructional leaders is because we know this stuff is what our babies need, but the people not getting it. So you're going to stay mad? You're going to get an attitude? You're going to recluse yourself and be pecking behind your emails? You're just going to, I mean, what are you going to do? And that's what we're talking about today. First, you got to understand adult learning theory. Yes, thank y'all in the chat. Thank y'all in the chat. Curiosity leads to connection. And yes, I don't even know if it was just a divine download from the Lord God Almighty with those 3 C's and just a collection and conglomerate of, it's a lot of stuff in this brain. So thank you for the talk back about those 3 C's. But when we're talking about adult learning theory, I'm gonna just name these off. Self-concept, right? So adults need to be seen and treated as capable of making decisions, right? Number 2, experience. They've got a lot of experience. I don't care if they're first year teachers, they've got life experience. How are you tapping and connecting through your curiosity? Come on, Brooke. How are you connecting through your curiosity to bring out their experience? Because you got to be tapping into their experience in order to build the bridge of buy-in. Okay, that just came up in my mind. We're trying to build the bridge to buy-in, right? Build the bridge. How are you building that bridge to buy-in if you're not tapping into the genius of the teachers that you got? See, we know the kids have got the genius, right? We talk about this a lot, but oftentimes the leadership, sometimes you're so caught up, and I've been in that experience, because I've had to answer to district personnel, right? I've had to answer to the compliance measures that they want seen. I 100% get it. But at the end of the day, some of those things I had to say no or not right now because something more important is on my plate. And if I don't connect with these teachers, because I was coaching them, if I don't connect with these teachers, because I was bringing ideas to the leadership table, what are we gonna do to get the leap, right, to happen with our young people? How are we going to do it? First, it's got to start with the adults. So I had to tap into their experience. Number 3, a readiness to learn. I've talked about this before, you all. They have to have a readiness to learn. They've got to come, right? They become ready when they can see how what you're bringing makes them ready. Like the who is that? Pastor Troy, I think. If I'm wrong, y'all tell me, hip hop heads. We ready. We ready. If they are really embodying that vibe and that energy, right, then they're able to see that the errors I make are not an indicator of my less thanness. I make up words a lot. If you don't know me, you're going to learn today, right? I make up words a lot. It's not an indicator of me being less than. It's actually a sign that I'm ripe for learning, right? Because I'm ready. That means I'm ready to encounter the challenges that are going to come with this new initiative. I don't care if the initiative is equity centered or not, but for the sakes of my root work and the work I do is rooted in equity, right? So we're talking culturally responsive teaching. We're talking transformative social emotional learning. We're talking restorative practices. We're talking all those hip hop ed, all those liberatory frameworks. And in order for folks to be ready to encounter that new stuff, right? Because for them, even for me, a lot of that stuff was new. Baby, in high school, I didn't have hip hop ed. I didn't have anybody teaching me about connecting it to my real life unless we were in like a career-based classroom. But the curriculum, math, science, English, history, none of that. None of that. And I went to Little Rock Central High where integration happened in the 50s, right? Where everybody talks about. You would think, but no. So you've got to be able to show that what you're bringing to them is new. Yes, I understand it is new. But what I also understand is that I've got a support system. I've got a cushion for when you fall, because guess what? It's okay to fall. It's okay to trip a little bit, right? It's okay to not have your bearings every day. That's the messiness of learning. So these things, this is why I'm really blessed and grateful that the clients I work with, I had to prime them for the first year. But this second year that we're working together, I'm so grateful that they have brought their leadership team on. And I'm doing the work of leading with soul with their leadership team to support the teaching from the soul. You see what I'm saying? And now we can make that connection and that bridge so that this newer, for some, way of being, not just some stuff to, because this culturally responsive teaching is just not a checklist. I mean, I can have some look fors, I can have some standards, I can have some things I'm paying attention to, but it's an embodiment. My framework with Scholars for the Soul, we embody, model, and share. You got to embody this in your soul. And if you don't, and so to shorten it, if you don't body this work, it's not going to go anywhere. So the initiatives that you have, especially if you're doing equity, that means you're leading with soul. You've got to know what that means, right? So number 4 is they have to see that there is an orientation to the learning. What does that mean, Dr. Mill? That means that the adults are going to be problem centered. So if you're not connecting the work you're doing with solving some problems or hitting some pain points or providing some support to what's happening in their classrooms right now, you're going to miss the mark. And then lastly, of a still adult learning theory, because I didn't got to preaching a little bit too long, but let me keep going. Motivation. Adults are motivated to learn when they can see a clear why, a relevance, right? And so often I don't think I posted it yet, but I made a video and I was making the point that sometimes we're doing, because I've experienced this as a teacher and then on the instructional leadership team. And you have to push out a new curriculum, or you have to push out new strategies, or whatever the district or the state for that matter is has invested their money in, right? Because they are the ones who invest those millions of dollars oftentimes into different programs. I just witnessed that at a school that I was coaching a teacher on in March. Millions of dollars into a program that's online with individual teachers and all this and that. But anyway, the point is, you have to have the buy-in to get that going, right? But if teachers are not going to see how this connects to what I'm doing right now, why is this even important? What is the point? They're not going to be motivated. So these are some of the factors when we're talking about adult learning theory, also called andragogy. Say it with me like we did last week. Not pedagogy, but andragogy. Look it up. Especially if you facilitate learning spaces for adults, you should definitely, if you're not already, be tapped into adult learning theory, because it makes a difference with how you present the gems you're bringing, so that it's not just a motivational talk, but it's actually going into practice. Okay. So even with these concepts in mind, if you're thinking of these, you may still experience resistance, right? But you've got to remember that even though I know resistance is on the horizon, right? Whether it is under the table in those petty ways, right? And listen to last week, I talked about identifying the different pockets of resistance. And let me go up and give just a couple of, see if I can find my notes from there. But those pockets of resistance, hold tight. Oh, okay. I'll hold tight. I'll give those a little later. But yeah, even if you are able to figure out where the pockets of resistance are, you got to know the types of resistance. So when I mean pockets of resistance, I mean, where does it show up? How does it look, right? What is the spectrum of resistance types? Because now, once I'm, what did they used to say when we were younger? I'm okay. What am I? A gen? No, I'm a millennial. So when we were younger, NBC had that commercial with the rainbow, and it'd be like the more you know or something like that. And they'd always bring on, y'all remember that? Let me know in the chat if y'all remember the rainbow with NBC, and it let you know the more you know, and it give you some kind of information or PSA or some kind of whatever, right? But once you know how this resistance looks, how it takes form, right? You remember that? How it takes form. Now you're closer to where you really need to be, which is strategy. If you don't have a resistance strategy in your toolbox, if you don't have one locked and loaded, if you are not ready, y'all remember that? Yeah. If you are not ready with a resistance strategy, and I don't just mean one thing, and I'm not going to give you all the resistance strategy in this live, because I am hosting a free masterclass for that on November 19th. The link is in the bio for those watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You see the link in the comments. But you've got to have this resistance strategy locked and loaded with what to do to build connection, to build motivation, and to ensure that you've got a very well created, or what's the good word? Well cushioned is what I want to use, because I'm thinking about a mattress, and if you fall, then you can fall on something that may shock you, but it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't put you out of the game, right? So you got to have a well cushioned support system, right? And so we go into that a lot. We're going to go into that very deeply on November 19th about how to really navigate that resistance and what kind of strategy you can take into the school the next day. So here are some of the spectrum types. This is the meat of the matter, right? So when we talk about types of resistance, one way, and I've talked about this before, but one way you're going to see resistance pop up, honey, some of them will let you know open mouth. This will never work. I don't understand why we're doing this. That doesn't make sense. This won't work for our kids. I've heard that so much, right? You're going to receive, number one, I'm going to give you just maybe two or three. verbal opposition. They're going to openly express skepticism, disagreement, even criticism while you're having either your staff meetings, your professional learning communities, aka PLCs. They're going to voice their needs. But remember last week I told you that every time they voice their needs doesn't mean they don't want to be on board. Remember last week I gave y'all those percentages. Again, go back to last week's live if you missed it. There is a percentage that's on the fence. And so we've got to have strategy to get those who are on the fence off the fence so they can get on the train and get on board, right? You're going to have some that no matter what, they may just stay resistant. So after you've done these things, I'm not painting rainbows and Skittles falling out of the sky for you, right? Because there may be other things in place, which if we work together, more in a one-on-one space, we can get down and dirty into what's happening in your building, in your culture, in your climate to figure out how to get to this root. But you're going to have some folks who are just not going to do it no matter what. But those on the fencers, those are the ones you really need to be focusing on. So if they're asking questions, it could be a type of resistance, right? If it's entrenched in this skepticism, this criticism, right? Not an openness to like real life, I'm curious type questions. More of a, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. I don't see how this is going to work. This doesn't make sense. We've already got too many things going on. And these things are valid concerns. So as leaders with soul, we can't brush them off as they're just always nasty. I always advise leaders, when you're rolling out, this is just something to give you for the free. When you're rolling out something new, and I've heard this from teachers, you need to take something off the plate. Because now the plate is spilling over. They can't even carry the plate from the buffet line to their table and start eating because it's too much. You're asking them to do way too many things. So that's something that you have to consider as a part of your strategy is what is something that I can take away that can also bring more space for what this more important initiative is. Number 2, type of resistance, a lack of engagement. So what happens is that people will talk in the faculty meeting. Sometimes they will show their disinterest, right? They might attend sessions. I've experienced it because I do equity work. I do culturally responsive teaching work. I do culturally responsive leadership work. So my focus is on those who are working with instruction, right? How can you support your school being a culturally responsive school? And I have seen and experienced just this week and the week before last, certain folks, because I went to a school that I was familiar with. So I knew the people who were going to be there or who should have been there. And some folks flat out didn't even come to the meeting. So some people won't come to the meetings. Some people won't show up. If it's a virtual meeting, they might turn their camera off and be doing something else. Some folks will just not be engaged. So these are the things you look for. You don't just swipe it away and say, you don't have to assume the worst, but you need to see that maybe something got in the way. Maybe there was a life situation, right? But here we go back to connection. Now I've got to connect to figure out why that lack of engagement is, because we want to assume positive intent at the start so that we're curious enough to dive in and actually figure out what it is. Now, sometimes your bias may come up, or you may actually believe based on their past experiences that they don't want to be there. But I always like to let people start fresh and start new, right? Brand new mercies every day. And let them, if they're wrong, if they're resistance, they won't be able to hide it very long, because the other one, number 3, is going to be minimal implementation. So once you roll out this plan and you tell everybody ready, set, go, now, even after they've gotten guidance, you could have gave them 1,000 templates. You could have said, this is what you do first, second. It could have been numbered. You could have provided all the things to do, but you see little effort. You don't see how it's being incorporated into their teaching. And so this means that you are actually in the classrooms, and hopefully you're in the classrooms before rolling out this initiative, which is some of the work I love to do with leaders is what are the phases we're going to go to. that will get us to the pre-rollout, the actual rollout, and then evaluating the progress while we're in the rollout phase, right? Because you got to set up, you got to be able to set up connection, right? You've got to be able to set up a connection space where you're using those principles I talked about at the beginning of adult learning theory. You're actually working to build relational equity and investment, right? You're investing in them so that you can build a firm foundation. A lot of the times the reasons your rollouts don't work is because it's built on shaky sandy ground. It's not solid. It's not concrete. It's shaky. And it's very sad. And I've been in an environment right before I left the school system where it was absolutely toxic. And when I say toxic, I mean we were in the news. I mean there were blogs from a community blogger with screenshots from our cameras inside the buildings. When I say it was toxic, that's why when I talk to you all about stuff, I'm not talking about stuff I've read in an article. Normally, I'm talking about things I've experienced, right? And this is while I was in instructional leadership. It was heavy in there. Oh, it was a us versus them, and then a few folks in the middle. It was heavy. And guess who was impacted the worst? The students. If you don't think that student outcomes, student behavior, student engagement is not impacted by teacher resistance, oh, you're not living in the real world. Because children pick up on energy way better than adults. I heard a quote once when I first started teaching. Students, young people, children are the greatest barometers of truth. They know when you faking it most times, right? Unless you just gotten real good at faking it. They know when you're being real. They know when it's tension between one teacher versus another. They know if you don't like the principal or the instructional coach coming in your classroom for observation. They know if you're nervous. They know all these things. They can read. You might think their literacy levels are low. No, baby, they can read. And they're reading you, they're reading the atmosphere, the energy space, because their souls have not been as tainted, because some of our babies been through some things already at young ages, right? But they haven't been as tainted as adults who's had more life experiences, right? So that minimal implementation. The last one I'm going to present, because there are at least 10 that I've got, but I'm just going to present 4. The last one I'm going to present is this passive aggressive behavior. Whew. That's when you got the petty coming in. That's when you got, oh, I'm going to do it. And they don't. Or, oh, this sounds great in the faculty meeting, or they appear to be on board, and especially in front of other people. Oh, equity for the children. We're social justice warriors. We're going to do it for the kids. I'm in there. Okay. But then when you go around to observe, you see nothing is happening, or very little is happening. Or when it's happening, it's done for compliance sakes. And what did I tell y'all at the beginning? This equity work of culturally responsive teaching, which is my bread and butter, social emotional learning, which is the soul of the instructional work that we do, culturally responsive leadership, all of that, it's got to have soul. It can't be bland. It needs all the seasonings. It needs all your juices, all your sauces. It needs Miss Tab's new paprika. It needs all of the different seasoning and flavors that come from your soul. And so it's hard. Big talk, no action. Brooke said it perfectly. Big talk, no action. And you see that, right? And there are others. I'm not going to hold space long because as you can see, I'm in a different space for networking, and I'll have an event to get to a little bit later. So I won't stay on as long. But I wanted to present those four resistance types. There's a spectrum, and we're going to go deep into the spectrum. This really, let me be clear. I love working, my target audience that I work with, primarily my teachers have my heart, right? Because you in the trenches, baby. You doing the work. I love getting in there with teachers. I love observing or seeing what they're doing, helping them co-plan. Like That's where it's at for me. But I also have grown to love working with the leadership staff that focuses on instruction, right? So leaders who are in there doing evaluations, because even last week I had a coaching session with the teachers, but I invited their instructional coaches in, and we looked at non-judgmental descriptive note taking for observations. And I didn't bring it in to give them an aha moment. It's because it was a part of a larger framework of our culturally responsive teaching labs, that work that we're doing. But that coach, both of those coaches were like, oh my goodness, we have realized we've been observing all wrong. And this is what I'm talking about. If your leadership does not know how to support the equity initiative, when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching, or if you call it SEL content or embedded SEL, it's really, to me, all is very similar. Okay. They streamline together, right? But if they don't know how to support this, teachers that are doing this work are not going to be given the support they need. They're not going to be recognized for the work they're doing. And sometimes when evaluations happen, then they may be deemed because of a focus on compliant things like objectives written on the board, or this got to be on this right side and this needs to be this, or the students were too loud, you need to work on classroom management. Very little on instruction, right? So those teachers who are on here, if you feel like there's a gap missing in your support for how you present instruction, that's what you need to be thinking about, right? Where is the gap? Because instructional leadership, if you're implementing, rolling out these plans, but you don't have the support from your leadership, you're going to miss the mark, and they're going to continue to be these instructional equity gaps, right? And so in order to do that, because we've got a lot of people, I get a lot of inquiries about the work of culturally responsive teaching and social emotional learning inside of instruction. But in order for that rollout to really, really be maximized, to gain the most potential for effectiveness, you've got to have the strategy first. You, the leader, this is who I'm talking to. You've got to have the strategy first. You've got to know how to identify, where can I locate pockets of resistance? Where can I be listening and connecting to and tapping into? What spaces do I need to be at? And then when I get there, what should I be looking for? What does it look like? Right? Because if I can see it, I can better, in a for lack of better words, diagnose it, right? So that I can actually see, okay, now I've got a clearer picture, because I see Dr. Mill told us about these resistance types. I see it here. So now I know how to work to strategize how to overcome it, because guess what? It's not going away. So let me review those: verbal opposition, lack of engagement, minimal implementation, and that passive aggressive behavior. Those are just four. I'm going deeper. I may come back and give some more, but I'm definitely going deeper into these pockets of resistance and the resistance types on November 19th. It's a Sunday. It's 90 minutes from 6 to 7:30, and I'm on Central Standard Time. It's a free webinar because I want us all to be out here winning when it comes to doing what our young people need. Again, the resistance is impacting them one way or the other. And we're not going to get rid of it by having small talk with our leaders about how bad the teachers are, how non-compliant they are, and all the problems with no strategies. You're wasting good time, good energy, when you could be identifying where to find this resistance, how to navigate this resistance, and how to strategize, right? So even if you are in the schools, or if you are one that works with leaders, right, you're going to face resistance. I face resistance this week and the week before last, right? But I've got a strategy that I'm putting into play with the leader at the school. I can't do all the things. I can't fix all the things because I'm not an employee, but I've got a strategy to show this leader and to lead her. See, I don't diagnose her. I lead her with curiosity to connect her with her staff so she can identify the pockets of resistance and she can identify the types of resistance so that we can strategize together to come up with a concrete plan of how we're going to overcome and navigate it with soul. So that's all I got today. Thank you all for tapping in. Those who have, some have come in and come out. Some have been chatting with me in the comments. I really, really appreciate that. Again, the link for the masterclass is November 19th. And the beautiful thing about this masterclass is it's going to be an intimate space where we are joining together through a Zoom link or a Google Meet, whichever one, but one of those virtual links, right? And we'll join together in space so that we can actually join in community with other folks who are about this life. But you sick of the resistance, right? I'm sick of it. But you can't stay sick of it. You got to come out the sickness and you've got to get into some strategy. So click that link in the bio, y'all. Sign up for that. I don't want to have a lot of spaces because I like to be able for people to connect, to talk to each other. And I typically have had, leaders and educators from across the country. And that's what's so beautiful, is because we can be in community with each other and learn some things that you've been doing that I may not have mentioned because I don't know all the things, but I got a good outline, a good framework to really guide you into this way of being that actually navigates resistance instead of ignoring it. Okay. So tap that link in the bio and share the live with somebody, you all. Y'all got to spread the love. Thank y'all for joining. I will see you on next week. Bye.